A little girl named Elspeth was joking with her parents before going to sleep. They are a Jewish family. Then Elspeth asked her parents why the Nazis didn't like their people. Hearing that, Elspeth's father said that the Nazis didn't hate them. It's because of the economic crisis that was detrimental to the workers, and the Nazis blamed the Jewish people. The father also said that Elspeth does not have to worry because the economic conditions will improve soon, and after that, no one blames each other. Shortly thereafter, their house was invaded by SS troops and Elspeth's parents were executed in front of this little girl. Next, the scene moves showing an artist named Marcel who was holding a mime performance in one of the brothels in France. Sometime later, Marcel's father came and scolded him because he looked like Hitler. Then Marcel said that he doesn't imitate Hitler. He just imitates his idol, Charlie Chaplin. Marcel and his parents are also Jewish family, so it's no wonder if they don't like Hitler. On the next day, Marcel helped in his father's butcher shop. Then Mrs. Garner came. Marcel asked how was Emma, Mrs. Garner's daughter. However, Mrs. Garner instead asked Marcel if he liked her daughter. If yes, Marcel has to hurry up and propose to Emma because at the moment there are only a few Jewish girls. After that, Marcel talked with his father and his cousin George came. George invited Marcel to join the scout movement to help Jewish orphans. Initially, Marcel didn't want to, but George convinced Marcel to come along. Until finally, Marcel wanted to help George's mission. Then George invites Marcel to go to the border. There, Marcel met the other scout members, including Emma. After that, a bus came carrying Jewish orphans, including Elspeth, who was in the group. Then Marcel also saw his older brother, Alain Mangel. Marcel asked George what their older brother was doing there. George said that Alain would help the children. After that, Marcel was moved to help his brothers and even offered to use his father's truck to take the orphans. Then the scout members took the orphans to the shelter, where the children were given food and clothes. Not only that, Marcel also comforted the children because they still looked sad after losing their parents. Then we were shown a speech from the leader of Nazi Germany, Adolf Hitler, who wanted to exterminate the Jewish race. After that, when Marcel was painting while wearing a clown outfit, he was approached by his father. Then Marcel's father asked what Marcel's motivation for art was until he put on a clown outfit. Marcel then told his father that his body gave no choice to him. Then they had dinner together. They talked about the current situation and conditions, including the children they saved. The next day, Marcel visits the orphans. Marcel is approached by Elspeth, who says that Emma likes him. Not long after, Emma came, which made Marcel feel awkward. After that, the scoutmasters held a meeting to find a way how they could save these Jewish children. As a scout member, the children will be trained on how to survive in emergency conditions. However, as they were just rehearsing, there was a broadcast on the radio stating that Germany had begun their invasion of Poland and was now getting closer to France. Thus, the French government ordered the Jewish citizens to immediately leave the border town within the next 10 days. On the other hand, because of the intensity of their meetings, Emma and Marcel got closer. Then the scoutmasters began to disguise themselves. They also cut off the children's beards, which is a characteristic of Jews, so that they are not easily recognized as Jewish children. In addition, the children were also hidden in several places, such as in the church, Catholic family home, and so on. Marcel and his friends are always monitoring the children's condition. Then we are also shown a scene about Germany, which successfully invaded various countries in Europe, including France. Therefore, Emma is even more excited to join the resistance movement to the Nazis, which are being promoted in France. Meanwhile, at their base, Marcel uses his skills to make fake passports to trick the Nazi troops in France. After that, the scene moves to Berlin, where there are 3 young men who are attending a party. Not long after, one of the young men beat up a homonazi, who was at the party. And then we were brought back to Emma and Marcel, who visited Elspeth in her hiding place. But when they were about to go home, they met a patrol of Nazi troops. They got suspicious. Emma was pretending to be dating Marcel, and their disguise was successful. So the Nazi troops left after checking their passports. After taking Emma home, Marcel met Elaine. Marcel wanted to join the resistance movement against the Nazis. This surprised Elaine because all this time, Marcel was considered a nerd guy. However, Marcel showed his seriousness to join the movement, and it made Alain proud of him. Then Alain asked Marcel to ask his father's permission first. In addition, Alain also told the whereabouts of Marcel's father. After that, Marcel rushed to meet his father. When he got there, Marcel was surprised that his father was singing, entertaining the Nazis. Marcel was also surprised because it turned out that his father also had artistic talent, that is singing. Outside the building, Marcel met his father and then talked about art. Marcel also asked his father why he was against Marcel becoming an artist, when he himself was also an artist. Marcel's father said that he just doesn't want Marcel to live in misery because most artists live in poverty. Hearing this, Marcel just smiled and he asked his father's permission to join the movement against the Nazis, and his father only nodded as a sign that he gave Marcel his blessing. A year later, the Nazi Germany had successfully invaded all of France. Therefore, they forced the leaders of the resistance movement to move to Lyon, while George stayed at the headquarters to monitor the children. Arriving in Lyon, the Nazi troops led by Lieutenant Klaus Barbie had also arrived there to stop the resistance movement against the Nazis. The troops immediately carried out a sweep of those suspected of being members of the resistance movement, and unfortunately, Alain was caught in the sweep. However, Marcel did not remain silent. He tried to free Alain by burning one of the guards in the prisoner's car, and then he ran away. Luckily, they were both immediately rescued by the other members who were ready to pick them up so they could escape from the Nazi troops. Elsewhere at the Hotel Terminus, which became Gustavo's headquarters, Gustavo was Nazi's secret troops. Lieutenant Klaus Barbie and his men bribed the citizens of Lyon to find members of the Jewish movement, and those who collaborated with the Nazis were called collaborators. Meanwhile, at the headquarters of the Jewish members, they are strategizing. In that meeting, Marcel was asked to make passports for 20 new members. On the other hand, the Jewish members who were caught were immediately executed by Lieutenant Barbie in an empty swimming pool. Next, we return to the headquarters of the resistance movement. Emma's sister Mila, who was also involved in the resistance movement, turns out to like Alain. Not long after that, the Nazi troops raided their base and Emma and Mila were arrested. Meanwhile, Alain, who managed to escape, rushed to tell the other members about the incident. Emma, Mila, and 2 other women were taken to the Terminus Hotel and they were placed in an empty swimming pool. Then Lieutenant Barbie killed those 2 women. Now there's only Emma and Mila. Lieutenant Barbie asked Emma to tell the whereabouts of the other members. However, Emma said that she didn't know. Of course, Lieutenant Barbie didn't just believe it. He threatened Emma by saying that he would take Mila's life by skinning her. Hearing this, Emma became confused, but Mila asked Emma not to tell the whereabouts of the other members even if Mila had to die. Finally, Lieutenant Barbie killed Mila in front of Emma. Meanwhile, Marcel and Alain were still monitoring the situation at the Hotel Terminus. They also see Lieutenant Barbie's wife enter the hotel. After Mila was killed, Emma is then freed and she gets a collaborator brooch. Then Marcel and Alain saw Emma walking to the station like a dazed person. Seeing that, Marcel and Alain rushed to see Emma, but the guard of the Nazi troops in that place was very tight. Therefore, Alain tried to distract the Nazi troops, while Marcel followed Emma to the station. Meanwhile, Emma, who was already at the station, intended to commit suicide by crashing herself into the train. Fortunately, Marcel arrived on time and managed to save her. After that, Marcel took Emma to his hiding place. There, Emma told what had happened to Mila. Alain, who heard Emma's story, was very sad because he also fell in love with Mila. What the Nazis did to Mila made Emma, Marcel, and their friends want to fight against the Nazis even more. However, there's a far more important thing now: to save the Jewish orphans. They then discuss how to save the children. And the only way is to bring the children to Switzerland through the Alps. But it was not easy because the terrain was quite difficult. Unfortunately, there was no other choice because in Switzerland, children were much safer. Later, Marcel and his friends met George. After that, they took the children to the station escorted by Marcel's father. After that, Marcel's father went to a place that is said to serve visa arrangements for Jews, but that was just a trap. Arriving there, Marcel's father was actually arrested. Meanwhile, Marcel and the children took a train to the Alps near the French and Swiss borders. They disguised themselves as scout members who wanted to go camping. But when they arrive at the station, Lieutenant Klaus Barbie turns out to be there for checking. Emma, who sees Lieutenant Barbie, rushing to hide in the toilet. While the children sing so Lieutenant Barbie won't get suspicious. Soon, Lieutenant Barbie approaches Marcel's group to check their passports. Not only that, Lieutenant Barbie also asked the children to chat near the toilet where Emma was hiding. Lieutenant Barbie asked Marcel how to instill an artistic spirit in his young children. Then Marcel said that they have to let the children find their own pleasure and don't force them too much. Because if they're forced, the children might refuse. But if the children are given freedom, then they are able to find their own artistic talent. After that, Lieutenant Barbie left, and fortunately, he did not know Emma, who was hiding in the toilet. After that, Marcel, Emma, and the children start along the Alps towards the Swiss border. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Barbie came home to meet his wife, but they instead got involved in an argument because there was a misunderstanding. In the middle of their argument, Lieutenant Barbie's aide knocked on their bedroom door. The aide conveyed an important piece of information. Based on information from the priest who was arrested along with Marcel's father, the scouts they had met on the train planned to flee to Switzerland. Therefore, Lieutenant Barbie ordered his troops to hunt down Marcel's group. On the other side, Marcel and the scouts were resting and circling the campfire. Suddenly, they heard a movement of quite a lot of people, and it turned out to be Lieutenant Barbie and his troops. so the scout coaches ordered the children to hide by climbing the tree. Lieutenant Barbie was confused looking for the children and also the scoutmasters. When the situation was safe, the scoutmasters ordered the children to get down and run immediately. However, their movements were noticed by Lieutenant Barbie, who immediately chased after them. The scouts ran as fast as they could amidst the continuous gunfire fired by the Nazi troops. But unfortunately, Emma was instead shot by the Nazi troops. Apart from that, the scout members' escape also stopped when they reached the edge of a cliff, but they had no other choice, so they finally chose to jump into the cliff. Magically, they all survived except for Emma, who had to die from a gunshot wound that hit her back. After that incident, they took a rest, and in the morning, they were awakened by someone. Then one of the scoutmasters asked where they are now, and that person said that they're in Switzerland. Hearing that, they immediately cheered, and the children were very excited. Then we were shown Marcel, who is now a liaison officer with the United States Army. After that, he played a pantomime in front of the soldiers. Marcel, a person who is considered geeky, is now a hero. He and Elaine have saved thousands of Jewish children in France. Meanwhile, Marcel's father was killed in a Jewish camp, while Lieutenant Barbie was arrested on charges of human rights violations and he died in prison. That is the story of the journey of an artist who is considered geeky, but he becomes a hero because he managed to save thousands of Jewish children during Hitler's invasion of France. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.